podcast from Tuan and Mike I think it's really cool, and that is what I wanted to say.
Two and a mic. Iran has seen its fair share of troubled times. That's what happens over a period of 3,000 years. This most recent episode, tragic and bloody and disturbing in so many ways, will inevitably also come to an end. Yet what kind of Iran will emerge from the fray? I'm joined by Parastu, a German Iranian with whom I have had many debates on political issues, ranging from propaganda and misinformation to gender equality and unconscious bias. Today we focus on issues much more personal to her, and you can hear her strength of purpose in her voice, and her sense of outrage in her choice of words. Parastu is committed to keeping the discourse alive, and through that, the movement rumbling forward. The people of Iran deserve an opportunity to live in peace and freedom. Freedom from oppression at home and freedom from exploitation from abroad. I compliment Parastu's courage and her dedication, and I also wish the people of Iran success in finding the peace that has been denied them by so many, friends and foes alike. The connection during the podcast was occasionally unstable, and there is a loss of quality as a result at some point. Fortunately, it only becomes apparent in some places. Thank you, Parastu, for your time and patience. Enjoy. So I'm joined today by Parastu, a person who I have come to know through my work with Amnesty, which is fascinating in itself. But Parastu, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, so obviously, I mean, you are somebody who is interested in so many sort of similar topics that interest me as well. And that's why in the past we've had some, brilliant conversations. But today we're going to focus on something which is sort of more personally connected with you because of your, Iranian background. So, would you like to just generally sort of talk about where things are at the moment in Iran and what's currently going on from what you are aware of course?
So the latest updates that I have on Iran are that there's still people being jailed and imprisoned. They're getting letters if they've been active online, maybe posting pictures of them not wearing a hijab, that they've been summoned to court and then they have to go there. I think there's a process right now that some executions are being halted, at least, and people are waiting for the sentences. And I know about what is the name in English? Political patronages, I think, is the word. In Germany itself, the work of activists like Daniela Seperi, they've been connecting 180 politicians here in Germany with people in Iran. So those are the latest news that I have on Iran. I don't have any idea on the next general strikes. I think the last one was 2 weeks ago. Luckily, no other executions so far that we've heard of in connection with the protests. There have been executions, but there were cases of people that have been in jail for maybe even more than 7 years. That has happened during the last 2 weeks, which surprised me because I was expecting the Iranian regime to execute more people now during Christmas, where they were thinking that people might not internationally be looking at Iran. But luckily that hasn't happened so far.
Mm. Yeah, and generally speaking, what is the mood still in Iran? Because you mentioned that the last general strike occurred 2 weeks ago, and a lot of people internationally were like, "Oh wow, this isn't simply a question of women sort of protesting against the lack of equality. There's a general feeling in Iran that we can't continue like this. How is that feeling? And, is it consistent now in the same way it was some weeks ago?
I think so, from what I've been hearing from relatives and friends that I've talked to in Iran. It hasn't changed that much, that they're thinking that at a different stage of the revolution right now. I mean, it is right now in the process of things somehow waiting to see what happens internationally with the executions, with the political prisoners, just to see how much that helps, how much international attention is also on Iran. That is what is happening. But I think from the energy of the people on the streets, that hasn't changed. They're not giving up, from what I can see. I mean, I think now it has been a week. Like a week ago, it was 100 days since the death of Masa Jina Amini. So that was also a big day in Iran. A lot of people went to the streets again. But of course, I was looking if there were like any kind of international coverage on the 100 days that since her death, and it hasn't been that far. I've seen videos online of some cities really like masses of people on the streets protesting and fighting for the movement right now. So that's what I've seen, and that the energy, I don't think it has changed. I don't think people are even thinking of any kind of diversion or being like, okay, maybe let's talk about reform or anything. The demands are still the same, maybe even becoming more solidified in the chants that we can hear on the streets.
I mean, we're both familiar with, especially the Western press, and they tend to focus on elements of interest, which for them sell papers or encourage clicks. So unfortunately, if a person is killed, if there's been a mass shooting in the States, for example, if there's been an earthquake or some tragic event like those that we've followed in Iran, like those that we've seen in Ukraine, that's when the news cycle sort of jumps up again. So in some ways, perhaps it's a little bit reassuring that Iran hasn't been such a focal point in the news. But on the other hand, as you said, this patronage element, which may in some ways be swaying the political powers in Iran. If that patronage were to sort of not necessarily lose the momentum, but if it doesn't have that popular support, then it may weaken. And that's also a fear, isn't it?
Exactly, because I've been talking to people and they're saying, oh, I don't even know how much of an impact they can have, these patronages on the people. And I keep telling them, and I really want to underline that's not the right idea. That's not the right way to think about it, because really we have to think of the regime in Iran as being really easily put under pressure, I think, internationally. I don't think we should underestimate them being like, oh, these are so powerful forces that we cannot do anything against them. It doesn't work. And these are just letters that we're sending there. But really, I think we have seen that in these last I think it has been 2 weeks since the beginning of these patronages being connected, that the regime has noticed that, and that they have sort of taken a step back in their way of approaching the executions in Iran. Sweden, Austria, Germany are the 3 countries where I know that there's a huge number of patronages right now, and I'm hoping it's going to just grow and become more, because really anytime someone doubts that has any impact on Iran, I really want to tell them that no, don't worry, it's really important, not just the pressure that we put on Iran and the regime there, but the pressure we put on our politicians here too, to be aware of what is happening there and to really act. And I think that's why these patronages are good, because they work on both ways. Keep calling your politicians, keep sending them emails and letters, and they will feel pressure. I think it has, especially here in Germany, the politicians here have understood it to a large degree, that these patronages are really not just symbolic and they need to happen. So I'm really more optimistic than maybe some other people when it comes to that.
Right. And clearly here today, you're not a representative of Amnesty in Germany. So you're talking in your personal capacity. But I'm also aware, because of some of the other people I work with with Amnesty, that there is quite a very strong connection that Amnesty in Germany has with human rights issues in Iran. And actually, Amnesty in Germany is considered to be an extremely reliable source, both of information, but at the same time, as having some kind of influence with regards to either the rollout of news, or perhaps the communication or the two-way communication, sort of politically, between people, normal people like us or me, and the political forces in Germany, or perhaps even lower level politicians in Iran. How is that developing at the moment? And are you involved in that process too?
So definitely, Amnesty Germany especially has always had a strong focus when it comes to bringing attention to issues connected to Iran, and I can see that this year too. There have been some, I don't know how to say that in English. They were meeting in front of the Bundestag, and it was like
Like demonstrations, you mean, like that kind of thing?
yeah, demonstrations, but in the form of more standing there and giving speeches. In German, it's Solidaritätsbekundung, like
Okay.
showing a sign of solidarity, standing there. Amnesty Germany has done that, and now for the last Friday, this Friday, and next Friday, they'll be meeting in front of the Iranian embassy in Zehlendorf, and that'll be a vigil. They will be holding vigils for the people that have been killed and executed in Iran. So not just online activism when it comes to Iran, but also trying to really mobilize people inside of Germany to act. I mean, we have the petitions that everyone can sign, not just to the executions, but any kind of imprisonment, and has been for as long as we can think of. I think here, Iran has always been a strong focus of Amnesty Germany's activism. I think also because it works both ways, because we see a lot of also interest in the population here in Germany, with issues that are that we can see in Iran. So it works both ways. We see that people are really active and they want to show solidarity to the Iranian people, and on the other side, Amnesty Germany, maybe also for reasons of I have a few Iranian colleagues too, and then we have that inside information, that inside knowledge. I mean, that was also a thing I was really happy about a few weeks ago. Two of my colleagues from the social media team, Clara and Annalisa, we translated chants together, Iranian chants from the streets, and posted that for people to have as a resource to use to go to protests. So I do see some on many levels, like a mobilization when it comes to Iran.
Mm. But there's also a fascination, unless I'm mistaken, from as the Iranians themselves, of also Germany, as in they see Germany as like quite an interesting country, sort of perhaps culturally, politically, also to visit. Economically, obviously, Germany is a very powerful country too, and has Iran have Iran and Germany sort of always benefited from some sort of mutual trade, economic agreements as well. So there is quite a relationship, isn't there, between the two countries anyway?
Yeah, definitely. It has been for a very long time. I think if we think back to the last century, economic trades was definitely a huge relationship factor between the two countries. I think if you speak to people who are older than maybe 70 and in Germany, they even tell you like, oh yeah, I used to like travel to Iran and spend like my summer there or something. So that was the kind of relationship between both countries. And after the revolution, obviously, also with Germany's connection to the United States and other countries, it has dampened somehow. But I think Sweden, Germany, and the United States, their diaspora, the Iranian diaspora that is there, has just always been huge. And I mean, to a degree, I think Germany is the milder version of the active diaspora, maybe because it's just the nature that we are. I know many Iranians here in Germany who are slowly and mildly active in the community and not that open as I can see in Los Angeles, for example, just because of, the word Tehran jealous too. There's so many Iranians and they're so active in the community. Oh yeah, but Germany and Iran definitely, the communities here has always been strong because of the movement in Iran to when they were immigrating, choosing the countries. Sweden and Germany were both countries that had open embassies, so there was a huge number of Iranians that could come here. And I think Germany has always had a good reputation for Iranians to see as the country where things work effectively and efficiently, and the economy works. The economy works, and you will find a job there, and everything is not maybe that as chaotic as it can be in like a big city like Tehran and Iran. Is maybe those are the ideas, that you have some calm here and in your everyday life, in comparison to Iran. Not even in a negative sense. I mean, that's everyone can choose, but yeah, I think that's how the relationship between those countries came together.
Yeah, and I mean, and also from my wife's side, I can say that, I mean, she's been to Iran a number of times because she used to work on a project which was connected with managing the Zayan-e-Rud, which is this very important river in Iran, which provides obviously water to a huge number of communities in the surrounding area. And yeah, unfortunately, there's overuse, in some cases, pollution and so on. So the German ministry invested in trying to create a system in cooperation with the Iranian government to try to find a form of a system which would mediate, as it were, the impact of industrialization on the Zayan-e-Rud. And so, that relationship had continued all the way up, I think, until Corona, and even during in some cases. So yeah, definitely there is a close relationship between the two countries, and hopefully there can be some benefit to come from that thereafter. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because as you say, perhaps in the States people are a bit more emotional, a bit more vociferous, the sort of shout a bit louder than people do in perhaps Europe. But maybe that's also an American cultural thing, and not just the Iranian diaspora there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it definitely, that is a factor of how, the relationship between the people inside the country and the immigrants that come there, how much you feel that you're free, to express your cultural identity. And there might be, I mean, due to Germany's, also now rising right-wing populism and anything else, it might just be a culture difference in that too. But also, I think when I was reading upon the history of immigration from Iran to other countries, the story of immigration to the United States, I think it started maybe even earlier than to European countries here. So that has also been a big factor, I think, in differences between the types of immigrants. More than 40 years, even before the revolution, the Iranians that moved to the United States, they will be wealthier, maybe, had a different status, and they had just, maybe also when they came there, they felt just more easily accepted, because Iran also had a different reputation during that time in the United States. And with Germany, it's just, I always see it as a soft type of integration. Sometimes it's also assimilation. You are not that open with your Iranian identity in some cases here. I mean, not everyone here in the diaspora is like that, but I think that's a huge difference too. The word assimilation, I wouldn't connect it to the Iranian diaspora in the United States. I would see it more here in Germany.
Yeah, which is interesting. We have some similarities culturally, you and I. So I sort of represent as it were, the Armenian diaspora in some cases. And I have lots and lots of friends of mine in London, or at least I had friends who I grew up with, and they were Armenian, but Iranian Armenians. And so therefore we always used to sort of joke around, because Iranian Armenians speak Armenian with a very strong Iranian accent. And my Armenian background is, other parts of the Middle East, so Lebanon and Iraq, where there is a slightly, I would say, softer accent. But there's also a dialect issue. So I'm Western Armenian dialect, and the Iranian Armenians who have had a community for over 400 years in Iran have the Eastern dialect. So again, there were slight differences there. But the point is that for me, Iran was never a strange country. Do you know what I mean? I kind of grew up knowing people from that place, and they always spoke warmly of Iran. They were affectionate with regards to how they felt about the country. And whenever there was I remember there was a football match between Iran and the United States in a World Cup. And I've never seen so many Armenians watch a football match as that particular game. So even the people who hated football, they were there. There was, like, I don't know, about 150 people watching Iran play this football match against the USA, and it was just a great atmosphere to see. So yeah, this is why for me Iran is of a particular interest, as well as the Middle East in general, because I'm kind of familiar with how people from Iran affectionately feel towards the country, because they know how different it is to the Western reputation that it has. So in the West, Iran does have this reputation of being a very, very restrictive country. There are zero freedoms and so on. But it's not always like that. And it's not like that under every circumstance. And this is also one of the reasons why it's so extremely unfortunate or horrific that these events have even taken place, because there was no need for them to have taken place in the way that they have. But I mean, you know better than I do. I mean, generally speaking, when you've been to Iran, have you, okay, you have to obviously follow the customs and the norms, but would you say that you felt unequal, generally speaking, in Iran or in Iranian society, or when speaking with friends? I mean, how did you feel about, your position or your place as a woman in Iran?
I have to say I've been in Iran ever since I was a little child. So most summers we spend our time there with our family, and so Iran for me is my second home. Like Berlin is my first home in Iran, and Tehran especially my second home. And I have to say, me personally, I haven't been that involved or that exposed to the rest of the Iranian society that I know about from online activists and everything. So I can only speak of my family, and I'm lucky. Everyone in my family is very liberal, they're liberally minded, and there's not really the idea that in Iran women are it is that like that in the outside, like everyday life, and you have to go in your workplace and everywhere else. But the people themselves, it's like a veil that you can take off, and you see, oh no, the people themselves, they don't even consider the different kinds of restrictions towards women's rights and everything as being like the important element of everyday life. So I've personally only ever felt restricted because of having to wear the hijab in the street, and it's not about the hijab itself. It's just the fact that I cannot choose to wear it. I mean, 40 degrees in summer to go on the street and have to be covered, arms and legs and everything. That personally, I would not choose to put that much clothes on. But those are the things. So it's the state. It has never been any male person in my family or anyone on the street that I've have encountered that was trying to tell me or put me in place and say, you're a woman in society, you have to act differently. It has always been the state and the laws that are there. And I also wanted to speak about the fact that you were saying that for you, Iran is not a strange country, and the perception that some Western countries have on Iran. And I always feel like, as a Iranian German person, it's always like a job of an ambassador to change the narrative and to show that Iran and the Iranian society, it is not the way we always hear about the negative news that we have on the news. And I think that's, for me personally, always been my job to be like, yeah, I know about these horrific things that are happening in Iran, but it's the people didn't wish for that. The people don't want that, and the people there, they're really not that different. I mean, it goes personally, I think it goes for every country on earth. The idea to see any country as strange is something that I wish we would work on, and don't feel that distance from other cultures and other people. So yeah, I think that's my personal mission, to show people that Iranians and people, they're not that different from any other people on earth. And we can just imagine, the young people in Iran have the same wishes and the same hopes and desires for their life that, any German person would have, or any American person would have.
Yeah, and maybe people have heard it many times already, but it's important to remember that Iran or Persia has a huge history. We're not talking about a country which was brought into life after the end of the Second World War because the British decided, yeah, okay, let's draw some borders and call it Iran. It's a place with a huge culture. I think Tehran itself has a history of 3,000 years. There is a vast culture behind this country, which a lot of people underestimate. And also, if we want to talk about how socially and politically Iran has changed since the times of the Shah, or since the Second World War, we also have to look at the interventions that other countries have, have actually introduced themselves and undertaken. And it's not an element of being or trying to find a way to justify what's happening in Iran, because I think that what's happened recently is a horror. But I can't judge the culture. Here we are talking about some very misguided, powerful men who have introduced rules which are wholly unjustified, and I cannot support it in any way. And obviously most people can't either, and that's why there's so much by way of movement and support for the movement within Iran. But this should not be an opportunity for people to criticize the Iranian or Persian culture, but this should be an opportunity in some ways for debate, dialogue to sort of take place between countries to try to find a solution. And, as you said, this political patronage is a system for achieving that.
Exactly. It's not just a culture that we should not see as, open to criticism right now in regards to the revolution, but also the religion too. That's why I always want to differentiate when I talk to people and see their support. I don't want to see Islamophobic support towards the movement right now in Iran. It really is not about being like, oh, it's the hijab, it should be gone. I've heard some people say that women in other countries should take off their veil and their hijab in solidarity with the Iranian women. And even though, might for some people sound like a nice show of solidarity, but that's not what the movement right now is about, and the revolution, to just take the people there and be like, oh yeah, but they're fighting against Islam, or they're fighting against their Middle Eastern culture that they have. It really is not. And we can see it also from the points of human rights, that human rights are universal and they should be universal. And which is why right now when people are saying like, oh, be careful of not imposing any kind of Western or European ideas on Iran. And that's definitely what should not happen. But at the same time, what the people are fighting there is not to become Western or European. They're just fighting for human rights, to not be killed just because they're going to the streets, to not be killed because they're choosing not to wear a hijab, or to not be killed because they don't want to, they want to have friends from the other gender or anything, any kind of restriction like that. Those are just basic human rights and needs, and it's not, you cannot just trace them back to culture and then try to justify and be like, okay, Iranians were supposed to be, supposed to live like that and to be like that. So it's really important to differentiate the different levels and make sure that it's not about imposing any kind of Western or European ideas on Iran. It's just about human rights that are universal, and that should be the focus of any kind of debate that we have. That it's not, as you say, it's important not to take that as the starting point to criticize the culture in any negative way, or to criticize the religion, but definitely to always go back and say like, no, look at what the people are demanding on the streets. They're not saying we want European rights. They're saying we want freedom. And I think that's these chants, they're so universal. And women, life, freedom, Zan Zendegi Azadi is something that has echoed so much around the world because of its universal nature, and not because it's bound culturally to the West or the European countries.
Yeah, and it's very important to remember these points. As you said, some people will sort of use this as an opportunity to jump on the Islamophobic bandwagon, and we have to be very cautious of this. If we claim to really value a democracy and freedom of speech, then we also have to obviously value the people's right to have whichever religion that they believe in, and to respect those rights and to support them. A point of interest thereafter, because as we said, we're both sort of diasporans in many ways. I was active in London in the Armenian community. I no longer am, but you, I suppose, I don't know. Are you active in the Iranian community in London? In Berlin?
I don't know if I would say active. I mean, I used to go to Iranian school when I was very young to learn how to speak, how to write and read Farsi. So there I had Iranian friends and I met, other Iranian people, and we also celebrated New Year's together in March. But after that, after the end of my Persian school, I really didn't have that many. It wasn't that I was actively trying not to be part of the community, but it just happened that I didn't meet that many Iranian people in Iran. And my parents are also very really relaxed people. So we don't have, they're not going out every day and looking for the Iranian community in Berlin. So maybe that's the reason I haven't been that involved. But this year, with the start of the revolution and the protests here in Iran, I've become involved again and active again. I'm meeting many, many new people and people that have just moved to Iran maybe like 2 years ago and have totally different kind of perception of the Iranian diaspora than I have because I was born here. And also sending each other the next protest that we have in Berlin and meeting there. That I have seen that the solidarity in, especially in online activism too, sharing the art of Iranian diaspora and everything. So I've seen that. I've only had that now with the protests that I've seen and felt part of the community. I mean, you were with a very big protest that we had in October with almost 100,000 people in Iran, but those were Iranians that came from everywhere else too. Because I was surprised to find out that there are only, I think, about 10,000 Iranians in Berlin, according to official statistics. So I think the perception, I was like, oh, maybe there are just many Iranians that are assimilated in Berlin, but maybe there are just not that many Iranians here. So maybe that's also why the community and the diaspora here is mildly active online and maybe not that present in everyday life. That maybe the Turkish community, for example, is here in Berlin.
Yeah, but I mean, there's 1.5 million, maybe even more Turks in Germany in general. I don't know what the statistic is for Berlin, but clearly it's a much larger community than the Iranian community.
Exactly.
Yeah, and how, because when I was involved in the Armenian community, I have to say, I mean, we had this kind of saying, really, I have a feeling that the Iranian communities are quite similar, but please educate me on this. So if you kind of put two Armenians together, they'd form 3 political parties. How is that with with the Iranians? I mean, are they similar? Are they as argumentative as Armenians are?
No, I think so. It depends on the age. I think if you find, for example, the same age group of Iranian diaspora, there will be, to a large degree, the same political ideology or the same political views. But when you start, for example, a 20-year-old Iranian diaspora person and then one who's maybe 50, you will not see that eye to eye in many cases, which is unfortunate, I have to say, for the protests in Berlin, because sometimes you have the same day and then you have a protest, one part in Berlin, another one somewhere else, and they're like, the one group is more leftist leaning. They have the Kurdish flag, especially because they're trying to show international solidarity for the large ethnic group in Iran that has been very much affected by the killings. And then you have another group of people the age of my parents who know Iran before the revolution too, and who don't have I think who do have a romanticized view of the monarchy in Iran. And then you see the flags too with the lion and the sun behind it, and a sword, and those are the differences. And then you speak with them and you're like, we're not at the point right now to discuss political ideology in Iran. We all have the same goal right now, which is to fight for the freedom of the Iranians there and not to see anyone killed anymore or imprisoned. So if you're leftist or if you're monarchist, we can have that later. But I have seen many people who are like, I'm not going to that protest because they're having these flags. And the other one they have there, and they have different chants too. The leftist protests that I've been to, they play different songs from the time to leftist movements. And then you go to the other group and they're older and they have, for example, the national anthem. They used to be the national anthem before the revolution in Iran. And they play those and play other songs and have different chants. So I think, in that regard, the Armenian and Iranian diaspora is very similar.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I mean, there is some people always say that, you don't talk politics and so on. And, the thing is, though, if you ever meet somebody from the Middle East, I think one of the most interesting things to talk about with a Middle Eastern person is politics. And because everybody has an opinion, even if they don't always voice it. And it's a great icebreaker, to be honest. But you've got to be willing to listen to opinions which will perhaps, emotionally different to your own, and then you're okay. But if you're somebody who can't accept listening to other people's opinions, then don't talk politics at all, I think. But yeah. And how is the unity generally then in Berlin with regards to these protests? So you said, okay, there's this issue with regards to monarchists, and just as a byline, though, if you remember when we did the workshop about the Iran-Contra affair, after this horrible murder of Mahsa Amini by the morality police, one of the things that I remembered was the Savak under the times of the Shah, which the Shah was, he was aided in creating the Savak by the CIA, and the Savak and this morality police, the difference between the two is not so great. I'm pretty sure the Savak also killed, tortured, imprisoned, as many people unjustifiably, and in fact created the possibility for the revolution to take place because of the inhumane treatment of innocent people. And so, there is this unfortunate element within Iranian society that a government that comes in feels the need to have this kind of organization there, to basically take care of the people, the dissenters, essentially. It's horrible, isn't it, having this? I don't see why it has to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, we will offend some Iranian monarchists with this question. But yeah, I mean, if you say the word Savak and conversations with monarchists, you will not be having a nice conversation after that, I fear.
Sorry, monarchists.
But yeah, sorry. But I mean, I have to say myself, I've tried to have these conversations because in my family, it's not like I'm the only leftist that I know of in my family. So I have had these conversations where I'm trying to be like, hey, let's not glorify and romanticize the monarchy before. Obviously, I really cannot argue against it. Obviously, the last 40 plus years in Iran are not comparable to the decades of monarchy that we had in Iran with regards to just the inhuman acts that we're seeing and just the restrictions in everyday life, the psychological torture too, and everything that is going on. So I think that's also a reason why arguments with monarchists are, it ends at this point. They're like, but, people were not, people under the age of 18 might have not been killed or tortured or raped in the jails as they might have been now in the last 40 years. And that's why I think it's really easy for monarchists to point a finger and say, look, at least it wasn't like it is right now, at least to the extent, there were political people who were imprisoned for their opinion. Some of them, or maybe a large number of them, were mullahs and akhuns and people who, were religious and at the end could show their martyrdom when the revolution came, to be like, oh, look what the Shah did to us. This should not happen again. Dissent is important for democracy. So yeah, I think that's why arguments are hard in that degree if you have them with monarchists and you try to use words as Savak and try to show that there is also another option and there should be another option for the people in Iran to choose and not to go back to the monarchy. And I mean, I don't know if you followed that, but the son of the former Shah in Iran is very active in speaking out. He's interviewed many times. I think his mother too. She lives in France. There are still people who have a large audience in the Iranian diaspora, especially. And we also have some satellite TV, like Manoto, for example, who have They I don't want to say that they romanticize the monarchy, but they do have the tendency to look upon the monarchy in a more positive light. just because there is such a big contrast. I mean, when everyone shows these pictures of women in Iran before the revolution wearing short skirts and not wearing the hijab going out, or wearing the hijab and someone else next to that person is not wearing the hijab, so having those social freedoms outwardly. So I think that's why it's very well, it's at least for me as a leftist person, to show that, you know, it's important to know and not to say that the monarchy in Iran and the regime right now were the same evil. I think that's we cannot argue like that. But to say that we can expect more, and the Iranian people, I think, I mean, we will let them decide in the end, and they have the hand, and they will choose their future. But I think they also are aware of other options that we can have in Iran. It doesn't have to be either monarchy or the regime that we have right now. But I think that's very obvious to many people. But still, it's always good to underline these things.
Yeah, but I mean, because of what's happened in the past, this is also why the religious leaders in Iran can turn around and say, look, these protests are being influenced by foreign powers, because, you know, it is a fact that in 1953, that's exactly what happened when they brought down Mossadegh. It's also, you know, very much the case that in the 70s, they were also involved you know, in these protests too. And so therefore, even if there is no proof that I have seen, at least, and I'm not exactly privy to any particular information, but there's no proof that I have seen openly that any external forces have done anything more in the last few months than they had done previously. It's very easy for the powers to say, this is the Americans, for example. And that's unfortunate.
That is very unfortunate, especially because I have seen the media coverage and for example, here in Germany or in the United States, being so they're so easily manipulated from the Iranian regime too, when it comes to giving out information that might give you hope. For example, a few weeks ago, when they were spreading the news that the morality police at the Gasht Ershad has been abolished in Iran, and that was just propaganda by the regime, and the diaspora and the activists online, they were very quick to point out and be like, no, don't take anything that sounds hopeful right now and positive from the government. It's just, they're just trying to appease the international community and try to show them, yeah, we've seen people protesting on the streets, so now we're acting and we're abolishing the morality police. But then not being aware of the structures that are in Iran. I've seen a Vice documentary a few days ago where they were showing the really intricate structure that the Iranian regime has with regards to military, the Basij, the Sepah, and everything. They have built so many independent structures of forces that it's so complicated to try to even abolish one of them and try to say that, oh yeah, we've undermined them now and they don't have that much power anymore. It is exactly for those reasons that so many independent forces were established in Iran, in the Basij and the Sepah and the Quds and everything, just for them to not be fallible to any kind of decisions or any kind of outside pressure that there might be. So that's why they could say, oh yeah, we've abolished the morality police. But in the end, everyone on the street in Iran that is part of the regime can become morality police either way. So yeah, it's very, very easy for the regime in Iran to point fingers and be like, oh, look, these people are just trying to tell you that you need to live a different life and you're looking for these things. And, for example, we have Masih Alinejad, an activist who lives in the United States, a very loud voice, reaches a large audience. And she is also, the regime frames her as a spy. And she's trying to just, manipulate the Iranian people from the outside. And they're always quick to say, she doesn't even live in Iran. Who's she to be speaking about your life here right now? But that has always been the tactic of the Iranian regime. Every kind of movement inside Iran, no matter the nature, it has always been, these are just forces these are just outside forces trying to lead you away from a good and moral life. But then, we have not just political protests, but we always have protests, for example, you were mentioning the Zoyan route a few minutes ago, when the people were just going there and being like, we need the government to step in. We have a shortage of water in Iran. We are facing the climate crisis here, and this is we cannot continue live in a livable way. Even those people that were protesting, not even saying anything against the regime like people are saying right now in the revolution, even they were imprisoned or shot at, and they were silenced too. So that's the nature of the Iranian regime, the restrictions that they're imposing on the whole country. It goes into any kind of facet and into any kind of issue that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, and there is significant unrest in many parts of Iran for different reasons. So it's not just this one. And as you say, the climate and the environmental effects of industrialization in various areas, overuse, is creating huge problems. So the government's going to have to sort itself out. But yeah, you mentioned sort of international individuals. I've also got a small list of other. So some people in Iran who have been arrested. So okay, we know about Ali Dai, a famous former footballer. His wife and daughter were prevented from leaving Iran. Their jumbo jet was redirected, and they were asked politely to leave. Ali Dai has spoken out recently against the regime. Taraneh Ali Dosti, please correct my pronunciations, was arrested for her stance. 3 other people, Hengame Ghaziani, Katayun Riahi, Voria Ghafouri, arrested and released. But then also a person who I'm more familiar with, Shore Akdashlu, who's a very famous sort of Hollywood actress as well, has taken part in demonstrations in support of the movement. Do you think that these famous Iranians have a positive influence on the protests? Do you think that their participation will help your average everyday person of Tehran to keep going, keep pushing, keep demanding?
Definitely. It has. Right now we can see that not just with the people that you've mentioned, but for example, musicians like Gugush, other very famous people, famous just because they reach such a large audience, Iranian diaspora and the Iranian people themselves, they look at them and they look also for. So definitely the Iranian diaspora looks at them and also criticizes them a lot if they don't see any kind of action, if they don't see them voicing their support for the revolution right now. I've seen that, for example, in LA. I think there was a concert by Gugush, and Iranian protesters were in front of the concert. We're like, how can you give a concert right now and not we're in mourning, we're a nation in mourning right now, and really trying to hold them accountable to any kind of silence that they might be showing towards because they're afraid. And anytime someone does speak out, they are very supportive and they're very happy about it, because then they're like, oh, this person who has who's seen and admired by many people is speaking out in support, and that will just change a lot. For example, Taraneh Ali Dosti, it was such huge news too for her to take off the hijab, post pictures of that, and then to be imprisoned. We've seen other actresses and actors in Iran show their support, also go in front of the jail that she's in right now. So people in Iran, they always look up to big voices, to any kind of famous person that can then also amass people. Ebi, for example, any kind of other person, when they say like, okay, here's the protest in LA and let's meet there, and they will amass some more people, and some they can mobilize with their voices. So anytime that happens, Iranian people are very happy about it. And the other side of the coin is that if there are Iranian famous Iranian people and they don't say anything and they keep quiet, then they will be judged very harshly by many people. And the disappointment is very big when you see, you saw that with the World Cup too, with the national team, when they were, obviously their families had been threatened, and we don't know how much pressure had been put on them. A few days before the World Cup, meeting with Iranian officials and posting pictures of them, not being sad but smiling, even though such horrible things are happening in Iran. And then everyone was very, very disappointed, and like, especially Iran as a nation of football lovers, to be that hugely disappointed by the team. And then everyone posts about them. You probably are aware the Iranian people are so so socially active online too, and posting messages. It spreads around like wildfire online when the news comes out. Also, sometimes in a negative way, because fake news are spread very easily that way too. But yeah, definitely, Iranians really look up to people that have a large audience and try to also show their assess how much they can admire them if they don't show their support for the people and what they're fighting for in Iran.
Yeah, it is in many ways a poison chalice, isn't it? So you're kind of damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. This is the very thin line that people have to walk, unfortunately. All right, I'll ask you one final question, if I may. I know you're not a fortune teller, clairvoyant. You can't tell the future, and I don't want to put you on the line or under any pressure. But do you think that we're going to get, and I say we, and by this I'm suggesting the people in Iran who are protesting for their rights, for equality to an extent at least, do you think we're going to see a kind of positive resolution to this? Do you think that the government are going to take a step back and say, okay, we overstepped, we are sorry? Or do you think to achieve what they want to achieve, they would probably need to have a new system of government? As in, how do you see it moving forward from here?
I would definitely agree with the latter, because I think at this point there's zero chance of talks with the Iranian regime. There's zero chance of the Iranian regime stepping towards the protesters and being like, hey, we've done some bad things, let's talk about it. I'm very sure that is actually something that I can say with certainty, that regime will not back down in any way. I don't think we can expect them to show any kind of mercy or any kind of willingness for compromise, which is why any kind of international politician trying to negotiate or trying to look for negotiations with the regime, I don't think that will lead to anywhere, because the regime really, they want their power, they want their money, and they're not going to give up until they have all that. And I cannot fathom them just letting everyone else take away their power in Iran. So I think what we do need for the future of Iran is international support. We do need pressure on the regime. There's I think really any kind of, whenever I see articles that are thinking of reform in Iran, or any kind of a way like that, that's not what the people in Iran are demanding. They're demanding regime change. They're demanding the fall of the regime. And you can hear that in their chants, and you can hear it also on anywhere else. These people we're not going to continue to accept their existence as any kind of force or power in Iran. There are some regime people who even execute their own children if they're not in line with what they're saying. It has happened in the last decades. So I really think we need to think of them not in a way of people that can be persuaded to do the right thing, but people that need to be pressured to step back, to step away, and to not continue having any kind of force anymore. Because if there were politicians, and if that was a government that you could speak to, you could talk to, we wouldn't see these executions. We wouldn't see people, even children. I mean, so far I think Amnesty has documented more than 60 children that have been killed this year alone. You wouldn't see all these horrific things that are happening there. The government would, the regime would, maybe hold back and not use armed forces in the streets to try to kill and violate people. So that's why I'm very certain that there's no future that includes negotiations with the Iranian regime. I think that's not, I cannot see that for the Iranian regime. And I think the people in Iran also don't, they would not be happy if, we would continue being like, okay, let's try to find a peace solution with the regime. That's really not what is being demanded right now. And also the other way around, just to make the last point, the regime knows that once they would start compromising with the people, maybe taking off restrictive laws, for example, the compulsory hijab, they would know that that's also the end of their regime. And because then there are people who will be like, okay, this is first step towards our freedom, but we are demanding other things too. We're not just demanding people to take off their hijab. An Iranian woman in front of court is only her value is only half of that of a man. So you need 2 Iranian women to speak out, but it's enough if you have 1 man. And there's so many other laws like that just, with regards to women's rights, they need to be abolished. They need to be, they're not in accordance with human rights. So that's why the whole system that has been established in the last 43 years has to be dismantled. And I think, if I'm saying that, I think that's also what the Iranian people are really demanding right now and fighting for in the streets.
Yeah, and well said. Because earlier when I mentioned that in Iran things are not quite the way it seems, obviously I wasn't referring to the government level. I was referring to at the level of individual people and how they interact within their groups. But you're absolutely correct to point out the law is very much against women. Legally speaking, women are living very difficult, unequal lives, and that has to fundamentally change one way or another. Parastu, what can I say? We've always enjoyed our conversations and our debates. This again has been fascinating speaking with you. I'm very, very grateful that you joined me, especially during this period of rest and relaxation. I'm hopeful that in 2023 we can talk again about Iran in a more positive light, or about any other topic indeed. So thank you very much for coming and joining me today.
No, thank you very much for inviting me and also for giving the platform to Iran right now. It's I'm very grateful that you're also seeing the importance of speaking about Iran right now, and especially where you're saying the relaxation period that we're in. It's still important that we don't step back and say, okay, we're not seeing any executions, so maybe we're seeing something positive. So thank you very much. It was really a pleasure. And always our Iranian Armenian culture debates too. I really enjoy them.
Good. I look forward to the next one. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Two and a mic.